What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We've got Teofimo Lopez, 16 wins, 0 losses with 12 knockouts, defending his WBA super title, IBF title, WBO title, ring title, and the WBC franchise title. Basically, all of the significant lightweight belts besides the regular title that Devin Haney currently holds. Haney basically has the lesser of the 2 WBC titles. So Teofimo Lopez is defending a bunch of lightweight titles against George Kambosos. 19 wins, 0 losses, 10 of those wins by knockout. Now, less than 3 years ago, Teofimo Lopez was just one of several guys who was like on the come up. Highlight reel knockouts against a lot of the not who's who, but who types of opponents. A lot of charisma, flash, backflips after the wins, but basically somebody who only the boxing hardcore purists knew about, and even they were totally unsure on how good this guy was. And then as his popularity grew, he had a pretty high profile fight, but against a unknown fighter. But by then, we're basically being told, hey, keep your eye on Teofimo Lopez. So Teofimo Lopez in July of 2019, so just over 2 years ago, fights Masayoshi Nakatani, then unknown, and Lopez has a ton of trouble with this lesser known, very tall, looping right hands Nakatani, especially in the early rounds, to where after Lopez does make some adjustments, kind of turns things around, starts winning a lot of the middle to late rounds to where he wins a unanimous decision. In the in-ring post-fight interview, he's basically saying, yeah, I had a lot of personal stuff going on in my life that distracted me from this fight, so my performance was less than stellar, and also I don't need to be fighting guys this tall because Nakatani's like a 6-footer. So this win against Nakatani was very unimpressive at the time and basically gave us more questions than answers in terms of how good Teofimo Lopez is and could be. And this is actually one of those wins that is aging better over time, because not only did Nakatani look great in his very rugged and rough knockout victory against former Olympian Felix Verdejo, who's now in a world of trouble. We're talking murder of his girlfriend and, would-be baby's mother. Just a total nightmare mess. You could look up Felix Verdejo's legal troubles right now. We might not ever see him in the ring again. We'll see how things play out, but rest in peace to the victim. Horrible, horrible story. But Nakatani fights Verdejo late 2020 and has a sensational win, one of the fights of the year, behind maybe that Ivan Barichek versus Jose Zepeda, and maybe a couple of others. But this was a really good fight between Nakatani and Verdejo. And so Nakatani wins that and now has a upcoming fight versus the longtime pound-for-pound elite Vasyl Lomachenko. That fight's going to be coming up. Very tough comeback fight for Lomachenko. But let's go back about like a year and a half after that Nakatani win for Teofimo Lopez. He then fights IBF champion Richard Comey. So again, he looked very unimpressive, at least to us at the time, not knowing that Nakatani might just be a bad boy who we are just learning more and more about over time. But this was going to be we're going to see what Teofimo Lopez has against a, granted, lesser champion, but still a credible IBF champion, Richard Comey. And Teofimo Lopez just sparks him in the second round, knocks him out. Now Teofimo Lopez is the IBF lightweight champ. So then after that, they're talking about making a potential Teofimo Lopez versus the great Vasyl Lomachenko fight. And to most people in the know, they're thinking, well, what the hell is Team Teofimo Lopez thinking? Why would they put this young, like 22-year-old, again, very little tested. Yes, he did have that step-up fight, earning a share of the lightweight championship against Richard Comey. But why would you put this prospect, basically, even with having a belt, still kind of viewed as a prospect, a promising one, but still prospect against Vasyl Lomachenko? Like, that's one of those gambles that could set your career back, or one of those losses that if it really doesn't go your way, it could just be something that's very tough to recover from, physically and psychologically. And so COVID 2020 comes, so the fight is postponed, but then it's eventually made official. Wow, they're really going to do this. Vasyl Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. Whew, good luck, Teo, because just about everybody was thinking Vasyl Lomachenko might have some difficulties, but then you're going to see that second, third, fourth gear kick in the middle to late rounds to where now Lomachenko's more or less on autopilot. Still have to be careful because Teofimo Lopez, if we know anything about him at this point, is a super dangerous puncher who can end it just like that. But Lomachenko's got the experience. We've seen him in the ring stopping Nicholas Walters, outclassing Gary Russell Jr., still Gary Russell Jr.'s only loss to date. And since he went up to lightweight, beat Linares. Granted, he got knocked down in that fight, but he ended up stopping Linares. We just saw the really good performance from Devin Haney against Linares just a couple weeks ago. And then Lomachenko also beats lightweights Anthony Crolla and then Luke Campbell. The Luke Campbell fight was pretty difficult, as was the Linares fight. So we're seeing Lomachenko kind of have more difficulty at lightweight versus the, making opponents quit on the stool, like 3 opponents in 4 fights down at 130 and 126. So Lomachenko takes on Teofimo Lopez, and that huge gamble for Teo ends up paying off. He wins several of the first few rounds to where you're watching the fight like, damn, Lomachenko's really going to have to turn things around because we're here through 6 rounds and Lomachenko's losing most of the rounds. He's falling behind on the scorecards. And Lomachenko does turn things around, but not enough to steal the decision. So Teofimo Lopez upsets Vasyl Lomachenko and earns the WBA, WBO, the ring title, and the franchise WBC belt, which was supposed to be non-transferable, but to spice up the fight, the WBC puts that franchise title on the line. Again, Devin Haney had the regular, basically the lesser WBC belt. So he was the one who's been on a schedule defending the WBC belt time and time again. But Vasyl Lomachenko was the WBC champ, and they granted such an esteemed distinction basically to give their blessing to let him fight who he wants to fight while still wearing a WBC belt so they can still collect a sanctioning fee. Yeah, WBC totally screwed this one up, and now Devin Haney's got this WBC belt that he couldn't even get Ryan Garcia, the mandatory challenger, to want to fight for the title because Ryan Garcia is basically a bigger celebrity name than Devin Haney. So now Haney is kind of saddled with this WBC belt that doesn't mean a whole lot. And there's this whole question on, is Teofimo Lopez the undisputed lightweight champ with all the belts? Most say no, some say yes, but we could all agree it's a big mess and the WBC dropped the ball and should really clean it up. But to the victor went the spoils in that Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez high stakes showdown. Great performance from Teofimo Lopez. I mean, we thought that he had a puncher's chance, but again, through the first half of the fight and then again in the 12th round, Teo actually outboxed Lomachenko. Now, we don't know if it was like an injury or if it was because of a layoff or if he was just a little gun shy, if he respected Teo's strength a little too much. We don't know what went into Lomachenko's slow start. I think he respected his power and didn't really turn up the volume until too late, basically. So here we are. Teofimo Lopez, first fight back since that sensational, really career-defining win at the tender age of like 22, 23 years old. Very young, Teofimo Lopez is taking on George Kambosos, one of his mandatory challengers, who again has an undefeated record himself. 19 wins, 0 losses. Although, if you look at who he's beaten most recently Lee Selby in a fight that I thought Lee Selby should have won via decision. They read those scorecards in the winner, and I'm like, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. I wasn't even pulling for either guy. I was just watching the fight to watch the fight and objectively thinking, yeah, I think, Lee Selby should have won that. Now, Lee Selby is one of those guys who got upset by Josh Warrington down at 126. So Lee Selby's been trying to kind of get in where he fits in because he's had a couple rough goes as of late. So he went to 130 and then 135, and then he gets the short end of the stick in an otherwise super close competitive fight versus Kambosos. So that's the win that Kambosos is coming off entering this fight. And then before that razor thin decision against Lee Selby, he had fought a old Mickey Bay in December of 2019. So this is pre-COVID. We haven't seen Mickey Bay, former champ himself, in the ring since. Mickey Bay might not return to the ring. So he fought a diminished, he being Kambosos, fought a diminished version of Mickey Bay. It was still a super, super close fight. In fact, it was a split decision win for George Kambosos against Mickey Bay, as was that win over Lee Selby, split decision win. So Kambosos is coming off two very close decision wins against, again, Lee Selby. I think that he's seen his best days. He's up a couple weight classes. I don't think he's at his best. Still formidable, still a good action-packed type fighter, but he's not strong enough to really put people out at 135. And the size and strength advantages that he had down at 126, they just don't exist here at 135. And then again, Mickey Bay was an older fighter. And then before that, most of Kambosos' fights were regional fights in Australia. So we only knew very little about him until just a couple fights ago. He was managed by Peter Khan, the guy who was negotiating on his behalf when Triller crashed the purse bid party and basically took this Teofimo Lopez versus Kambosos fight away from Bob Arum, Top Rank. So Triller was basically by proxy doing business with Peter Khan, who again was managing George Kambosos in the negotiations. So they liked Peter Khan so much, they basically made him basically the head of boxing over at Triller, the Triller Fight Club. So I think the official title is Chief Boxing Officer at Triller. So George Kambosos' manager, again, Peter Khan, is now pretty much the head of the boxing at Triller. But yeah, if we're looking at Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos, Teofimo Lopez has the power advantage, has the speed advantage. Kambosos is a solid fighter. He's a stalker. He does come forward and put pressure on the guys, but, he doesn't do so recklessly. He's not a brawler, even if parts of that Kambosos versus Lee Selby fight looked like it might have been a brawl. When Kambosos is pursuing, he's changing levels. He's doing enough movement so he's not just getting caught cleanly when he's coming in. He's got a nice jab. He throws his jab pretty hard, has a nice nice quick right hand, and has a pretty good left hook. He doesn't have devastating power, but it's definitely respectable power, unlike Teofimo Lopez, who appears to have life-altering, crushing power. So, it would be easy for me to say, oh yeah, Teofimo Lopez is going to mop the floor with George Kambosos. But again, Teofimo Lopez is so young, and this, crop of, fighters coming up, led by him. He's the one out of that 135. I mean, Shakur Stevenson's a couple weight classes below, currently one weight class below at 130. So I'm not going to include him in this group just yet, even though he's super young as well. But, you've got Teofimo Lopez, and then you've got the class of Gervonta Davis, who's a few years older, and then Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, who are just like 1 to 2 years younger than Teofimo Lopez. So he's just older than Haney and Ryan Garcia, but he's the one who's truly crossed that threshold and has proven to be a superstar, not just in fame and name, but in accomplishment. He beat the man to be the man. You know what I mean? So, although he has crossed a threshold, he's only been tested by true elite or near elite opponents in Lomachenko, and then before that, Richard Comey, and then before that, apparently, Nakatani, right? And then a couple fights before that, he did fight Diego Magdalena, who is a respectable name, and he knocked him out in 7 rounds, and he knocked out Mason Menard in 1 round just before that. And so, Teofimo Lopez, his last fight was a decision, and then 2 fights before that against Nakatani, another decision. But aside from that, it's mostly been knockouts for him. So, round by round, I expect him to outbox Kambosos. Mickey Bey, even in his later years, outboxed Kambosos in his, again, Mickey Bey's final fight. For a lot of those rounds, the sweet science, technical boxing nature of Mickey Bey edged the round against Kambosos. So I don't think Kambosos is going to be taking a ton of rounds from Teofimo Lopez, who's he's not a brawler himself. He doesn't recklessly come in. If anything, he's, either taking one step and slowly pursuing, or he's on his back foot slowly going back. Not a back foot fighter, but he is a great counterpuncher. So again, he's not like Corey Spinks, for those that might remember. He's not a guy who's circling and just, kind of avoiding and just looking to jab and move. He's taking one step back because he's looking for that moment to where you come in and he pulls the trigger on a right hand or on a left hook to put your lights out. That's what he's doing. And we saw in his fight against Lomachenko, he is technically sound enough to know jab to the body, use your strength, and then pursue responsibly. So I'm not going to sleep on Teo's skills. And I think that he's going to be winning the rounds, starting with the early rounds. I think that George Kambosos is going to be, doing some things effectively. I don't think he's just going to get caught cleanly out the gate. I don't expect one of these early knockouts for Teofimo Lopez. I think they're going to have to box it out a few rounds. I think we're going to go into the 5th, 6th, and maybe 7th and 8th rounds. And so the question is then, if Teofimo Lopez is up on the cards and say after 8 rounds, it's like 6 rounds to 2, or after 6 rounds, it's like 5 rounds to 1, something like that, is Kambosos going to keep on pressing the issue and coming forward, leaving himself somewhat vulnerable to get caught? Or is he going to try to fight a survivalist fight? Think Adrian Broner, once things started going wrong with him versus Manny Pacquiao and with him versus Mikey Garcia before that. Or with Shane Mosley versus Pacquiao after that, I believe, 2nd round knockdown, where you're basically backing up, covering up, the way that Josh Clottey fought Pacquiao. A lot of people fight survivalist fights with Pacquiao once they get caught cleanly. Some don't, and they pay for it most of the time. But will Kambosos press the issue, or will he fight a survivalist fight, and will Teofimo Lopez be satisfied with a decision win, or will he keep his foot on the gas, trying to open up opportunities moving forward, trying to get Kambosos to let his hands go so then he could counter that and maybe catch him with the hook? And I think that Kambosos can go the distance with Teofimo Lopez, and I actually think that he will. I wouldn't be surprised if Lopez scores a late TKO. I'd be a little more surprised if he scores an early knockout. I don't expect that. Kambosos does appear to have a very good chin. I haven't seen him get hit with anybody with nearly the power of Teofimo Lopez, mind you, but he appears to be a durable guy. He is pretty technically sound himself. He doesn't get caught cleanly. He tends to roll with punches pretty well. But I don't know, man. Like, Teofimo Lopez is looking very, very sharp and explosive. But, I don't think that Lopez is taking Kambosos as seriously, for instance, as he took Lomachenko or Comey before that. So I think that he's going to be a little bit less, all in prepared. This isn't his Alamo. This isn't all chips are in. I mean, he has to win this fight to keep this train going. But I think that Kambosos might overperform and Lopez might underperform to where Lopez wins via unanimous decision. I'm thinking something like 10 rounds to 2, 9 rounds to 3. I expect it to be a pretty lopsided win for Lopez, but somewhat competitive. And I actually think Kambosos is going to go the distance here. And if that ends up being the case, I would love to see Teofimo Lopez try to truly unify that WBC, all the lightweight titles against Devin Haney, right? Because, the other thing that Teofimo Lopez was wanting to do is to go up to 140 and and I don't know if it would exactly work out this way, even though I've seen cases of this, like in Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz, to where they're fighting in a division and there's a belt that's not in the division that they're fighting in that is on the line. So if Teofimo Lopez went up to 140, the idea is that all of his belts, lightweight belts, would be on the line, as well as Josh Taylor's, the undisputed champ at 140 after his win versus Jose Ramirez. all the 140 belts and 135 belts would be on the line in a Teofimo Lopez versus Josh Taylor showdown. But Josh Taylor's next fight will probably be against Jack Catterall, one of his being Josh Taylor's mandatory challengers. So if that is who Taylor ends up, fighting next, then I think that it's more likely that if Lopez gets by Kambosos, that we actually get to see Teofimo Lopez versus the surging WBC lesser champ Devin Haney, undefeated and coming off his win against Jorge Linares. That would be a fantastic matchup. But it would require Lopez's, at least for the time being, his representation, Top Rank, his promoter, Bob Arum. It would require them having to do business with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, who currently promote Devin Haney. And Devin Haney, therefore, usually fights on DAZN, whereas Teofimo Lopez usually fights on ESPN. Even though, again, this fight versus Kambosos is going to be on Triller because of Bob Arum's unwillingness to pay a ton of money for the fight, and Triller basically opening up the wallet at that purse bid. But yeah, let me know what you think about Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos, and if Lopez wins, what you think he's going to do next and what you would like to see him do next. I know a lot of people would love to see Teofimo Lopez versus Gervonta Davis next. Gervonta Davis is going to have his hands full up at 140 against Mario Barrios. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Please leave your comments in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.